Hi, I'm Molly.
And I'm Jamie, and this is our From the Pasture with Hired Hand podcast. As the owners of Hired Hand website software, we've been developing websites and creating internet marketing strategies for livestock breeders for the past 10 years.
The majority of our customers are involved in the breeding of registered animals, such as Texas Longhorns, Highland cattle, horses, and white-tailed deer, where the pedigrees are very important. The From the Pasture with Hired Hand podcast examines many of the differences in raising pedigreed livestock for maximum profit. Join us and learn what we're covering today.
So today I'm here with Phil Norwood of R3 Hilltop Ranch. Hey Phil, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Phil, you've been in the industry, or your family's been in the industry for over 15 years. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and maybe include how you enjoy using data to make, your breeding decisions, and have always loved spreadsheets and those types of things before we kind of dig into what we're going to talk about today.
Okay. My parents bought the property and then their first 3 Longhorn heifers from a friend, essentially for an ag exemption in 2006, January of 2006, which puts us at 17 years now. And I lived in Houston at the time, and it was a nice escape to get away from work to come up here near Waco for the weekend when I had the chance, and kind of became involved. And then over time, and as the herd grew, my parents decided it was time to retire, so I bought the herd from them, or their half of the herd, in 2018, and have kind of enjoyed being able to make my own decisions instead of being 1/3 of the vote.
Awesome.
And to get to the spreadsheets, I had a previous job, one of many, but that reports were very important. And every Monday I would print out 4 or 5 reports and use those to order new merchandise to ensure that the store stayed in stock. And then using information from each of those reports, you could determine operational opportunities, whether the receiving process wasn't being done correctly, or cashiers were passing off merchandise to their friends, or we had a theft problem, or a competitor had lowered their prices, and that was a big price guarantee, was a big sales pitch for our store in a very competitive market. And all of those things can be determined initially from the report and kind of lead you in the direction that you needed to go to, verify a price change, or interview an associate for stealing, or keep an eye out on a specific area of the store for shoplifters, just all from these reports. And so that's carried over into Longhorns. It's just there, all the data is there, and I may not know how to read it as well as I did in retail, but I at least have an idea of which direction to kind of move forward in, and learn more if I need to, or call an animal if we're at that point.
So what would you say, where does this spreadsheet fall in your journey of using data? How many other spreadsheets do you have going that maybe we don't know about?
Well, not many spreadsheets per se, but I do use the Horns database a lot. When my parents first got started, there were 3 heifers. In the first year, there was 1 calf whom they registered, named R3 Gunslingers Reveille, born in 2006. And each year, they registered every calf. And so when the Horns database came online, one of the things that I noticed was that calving interval was brought up in several places. Excuse me, just determining the interval between the previous calf and the most recent calf. There's a calving history report that shows you each year how many days between the calves. When you look up your individual animal, it shows you the average calving interval for that specific cow based on recorded calf. Anyways, short story long, they have reports that you can run, and so I utilize those reports in monitoring calving interval, which has up till now been, and still is, probably my biggest management tool for the herd. A cow that's about a heifer at a sale at 15, 16 months, probably 17 months old by the time she was 6. And I did my annual review on Horns, looking at calving histories. She's had 3 calves, and her average calving interval was like 420 days. which is a whole lot longer than the 300, 340 days. I mean, 330, 340 days that I expect or strive for. And so she went to a packing plant in Waco, and so did her daughters, just to move them on. And that's kind of how it started and where it's at.
Well, we really appreciate you being willing to share this one today with us. And just so our listeners are aware, this probably would be best viewed over video. We are going to have you share your screen and kind of walk us through the spreadsheet. And then following the podcast, if anyone's interested, they're going to be able to contact you through your website and request that they have access to the spreadsheet as well. You're willing to share it with new breeders to kind of get started and see if they like this type of data tracking as well, right?
Yes. When people have the beef report that we're going to go over and they have their results and they want to filter out in a similar way I have from 16 down to the 7, which we're going to discuss, traits. If they want to reach out to me, they can either request me to send them the spreadsheet once I have, figured out how to lock the formulas in, or they can just send me their results and I will input them into a sheet and email it back to them so they can see how their females score.
Great. Well, that's exciting. I'll be excited to hear how many people stick with us through the whole explanation and then decide to use it. So I feel like before we can really get started with any of the important questions, that maybe we need to just review some of the key terms that you're going to use a lot throughout the podcast. Right. So if you want to start there, that would be great. Okay.
So when you do the beef report through Identity, which is an extra report when people order the GGP 100K, is genomic testing. And those tests then can be used in the development of EPDs for the Longhorns. But until then, they have this beef report.
Not to interrupt you, Phil, but let's back up one step maybe for someone who doesn't know anything about this. The tests that you're talking about, those are actually ordered through the TLBAA?
Correct.
Okay. So it's part of the DNA testing that they're striving to encourage, right?
Correct. There's parent verification, and then there is the genomic testing, which is a GGP 100K test. And animals who have DNA samples submitted for that test can then be, there's an add-on test called the beef report that breeders can select and get the results back for, which is what we're about to discuss.
And do you happen to know, is that an additional cost or can that be included in that original score for free?
It is an additional $10 on top of the genomic testing. It's a separate test that's run. So there are 16 traits that are evaluated, and the way they do that through this beef report, since the Longhorns don't have their own EPDs, what they do is they compare the genetic markers, identified markers for cows against thousands of samples that have been submitted for purebred animals from 5 European breeds, Hereford, Limousin, Charolais, Simmental, and Gelbvieh. And so on one hand, it's kind of comparing apples to French fries in that they're Longhorns versus these beef breeds, more traditional European breeds. But at the same time, as my vet pointed out, a cow is a cow. And the real difference in these numbers are the fact that these breeds have been working on these types of genetic improvements for decades, whereas Longhorn started in basically 2018. And so there are some good scores, which are promising, and then some areas for improvement. So there's 16. They're broken down into 3 categories. There's maternal index, there's a performance index, and then there's a terminal index or carcass index. And I have focused my spreadsheet that we'll go over on the maternal influence, and because of the fact that I have a, albeit small, beef program, I do have a beef program, so I've included ribeye area and tenderness in the 7 categories. But the 7 categories are calving ease maternal, which is, let me see, I'll read it off verbatim.
Can you go ahead and share it with us, Phil, or are you not ready to yet?
No, I can do it. I think if I can figure it out. Let's see, share, window, identity beef profile. Okay, so calving ease maternal, if you can see my cursor, includes all genetic factors that impact a first calf heifer's ability to calve unassisted, such as pelvic area and her genetics for birth weight. Higher value is more calving ease. And you'll see when we get to the spreadsheet that all of my cows scored pretty well on calving ease maternal. Heifer pregnancy rate, which we'll discuss in detail, I believe, is a heifer's potential to conceive during breeding season relative to other heifers. A higher value is desired. Milk is the pounds of a calf's weaning weight due to the dam's milk production, optimizing milk to the forage environment. Stayability or longevity, which is I put on the poll. The chance a heifer will remain in the herd as a productive cow until at least 6 years of age, which is kind of funny since Longhorn people talk about cows breeding into their 20s. And then temperament or docility is genetic potential to be calm or have calm offspring. Higher scores indicate a higher probability of acceptable disposition. I skipped most of the performance or production traits. Their weaning weight and average daily gain, residual feed intake, hot carcass weight, and instead, like I said, I did ribeye area, which is ribeye area is measured on a carcass. Ribeye area estimates muscling in a beef carcass in square inches of ribeye at the 12th rib. Larger ribeye area progeny have more muscle and a higher percentage of retail product. Excuse me. And then tenderness is the genetic potential for beef tenderness on the Warner-Brasler shear force scale. A higher 1 to 10 score is more tender. So those were the 7. Where'd you go? Those were the 7 categories that I included in the poll on Facebook a couple months ago. And then once I had all of my results back, made the spreadsheet and had my brother assist me in weighing specific columns to put different emphasis on those areas, which we'll cover here in just a bit.
Okay. So I feel like the next logical step would be to maybe share the poll that you posted to Facebook where you asked fellow breeders their opinion on the traits as well, right?
Correct. I asked, let's see, I did that wrong. Hold on. Share screen. Windows. I don't know how to do that one. Share. Did that work?
Yep. Can you zoom out a little bit by chance? There you go.
I don't know how to zoom. Okay. So on September 23rd of last year, I asked which Texas Longhorn breed traits are most important to you. These are 7 of the 16 categories ranked on the Identity Beef Report. I've removed some low priority categories for me, like hot carcass weight, residual feed intake, etc. Please choose your top 3. Calving ease was by far, I say by far, 24%. There were, as you can see, 80 votes of the 334 votes cast were for calving ease. Fertility was 20% or 71 votes. Milking ability, 15%. Breed longevity, which would be the stayability definition that we just read, was 14%. Temperament or docility was 24%. And then surprisingly, and this has changed since I did the spreadsheet, but I can change it real quick. Ribeye area is only 2%. Only 4 votes of the 344 votes cast consider ribeye area an important trait. And then tenderness, 6 votes or 1%, which that's kind of interesting that 4 scored higher than 6. Anyways, So that's where we're at on the poll. And then I used those results, and I took the exact number of votes divided by 344 to come up with the percentages I used on the spreadsheet.
So basically, you took the results of the Facebook poll, and then you created the spreadsheet, and that's how you're essentially ranking all of your R3 branded females born after 2018. And that's generating the data that you're using to decide if you're going to cull some of them, continue breeding them, right?
Yes, I do have. I use the Facebook poll to make the spreadsheet, and then I decided that because I do have a beef program, the ribeye area and the tenderness are more important to me than other longhorn breeders, as evidenced by the poll. So I actually have a different one. I took away a little bit from calving ease because everybody scored so high on that, and I took a little bit away from the longevity because that scored so highly, and it's important but not as important. And then I moved those percentages basically, like, so ribeye area on my home sheet is 3% and tenderness is 6%, which is basically I tripled what the Facebook poll, which doesn't change a lot on the animals that ranked really high, and the animals that did not rank as well, those, interestingly enough, don't move a lot. But when you do change it, there's a lot of movement in the animals in the middle, which is, I think, kind of cool.
Okay, yeah, and it sounds like maybe the spreadsheet could be customized down the road for people who are solely focused on a beef program, for example.
Right.
It's a great way to just kind of prioritize your own characteristics that you value.
Correct.
Awesome. Well, why don't you go ahead and pull your report up and just kind of walk us through it. Tell us why you're excited about it, how you're using it, just everything about it. We're ready to hear.
Okay. All right, so this is the spreadsheet. You can see the Excel up at the top. And the weights, which I followed for the Facebook poll, are pretty close. These are, like I said, I didn't round up or down. I used the exact votes versus the total votes. So calving ease maternal, according to the Facebook poll, ended up at 23%. Heifer pregnancy rate, 21%. Milking, 16%. Stayability or longevity, 13%. Docility or temperament at 24%. Ribeye area, 1%, because it only got 4 votes. And tenderness ended up, I don't know if you can see this, but a 1.74%, so it rounded up to 2. And then ribeye area was a 1.16% and rounded down to 1. And what I did was I ranked them. Each column can be sorted. Like date of birth can be sorted youngest to oldest. I can sort calving ease maternal from highest to lowest or lowest to highest. Same with heifer pregnancy rate all the way across. I did the total score of the 7 columns here and did the average of those. And then that's when I thought, I called my brother up and he helped me do this weighted average. Excuse me. So that, and this is using the Facebook poll. So even though, for example, Scout's Cheer scored a 49 and averaged a 7, her weighted average based on her scores and the Facebook poll, she is a 7.462. And then Wright's Princess, who is another BR Mr. Wright daughter, who scored a 50 on the columns, and averaged a 7.14, just a little higher than Scout's Cheer, also averaged a 7.462. And so it goes all the way down, and our lowest score is 37 total points, an average of 5.29, but then with the weight, it ends up at a 5.811. And then I have color-coded the 2 bulls. We owned Grandism. His daughters are in green, as is down here on the legend. And then I was able to lease BR Mr. Wright last year. And so his daughters, I sent the results of his test to the Allens, Karen and Brian Allen at Circle A Longhorns. But this is how his daughter scored. Anyways, so that's where we're at on that.
So what about the green and yellow coding? Where does that come in?
So I did each of these codes. I did 5 was average. I kind of decided that for my group. 5 was average. So everything that's above a 5, I used the background in green or highlighted the cell in green. And then everything that's under a 5 that stands out to me is highlighted in bright yellow with red numbers. And that's the 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s all the way down.
So I'm not sure if I'm jumping ahead, but is one of the things you're going to kind of go over with us where your cutoff is in terms of the weighted average, like where you feel the top half of the herd falls versus the bottom half? Or heifers?
Well, yeah. So right now, my priorities on the spreadsheet that I have, heifer pregnancy rate, the fertility, milking ability, and temperament are my top 3. And they're all like 22% of, so they make up 3/4 of the, 2/3. Those 3 columns make up 2/3 of the report. And to tell the story very quickly, I had not ordered the beef report on all these genomic tests that I had submitted because I really thought that as an association, we would have enough samples to do Longhorn EPDs before now. But we don't. And that's why I ordered the reports. And while I was waiting this summer, there was a lease bull here. And I have in my phone on the calendar, tentative calving date of April the 4th. And I don't know 283 days before that what the date was. But 3 weeks later, the bull is after this heifer again. It's the first calf heifer. And I was like, that's not good. Then 3 weeks after that, he's after her yet again. And I thought, this is not good at all. So when I got the results from all these reports back, here is Grainism's Easter Lily, and I don't know how to zoom in, but her heifer pregnancy rate, that fertility score is a 2, which is so I was not surprised to see this 2 on the report. And I don't know, she hasn't been in standing heat since the bull went away. At least I haven't seen it. And so I'm still a bit of a doubting Thomas on how valid all these scores are. But if she doesn't have a calf or has it late in the in the calving season, then in all likelihood in a year or 2 she'll go away. And when she does, then that means that the 3s and the 2s and the 4s under heifer pregnancy rate, regardless of their other scores, are probably going to go away as well. And you can see these low HPR. I don't know how to freeze the column. Freeze the header bar, but you can see these low scores for heifer pregnancy rate based on fertility. And there's a lot of low scores on tenderness also. So that's probably what's going to happen. And we'll work on improving our average. Right now, as we scroll down to the very bottom, based on these 7 traits, the herd averages, calving ease is 8, HPR, which is heifer pregnancy rate, is a 5. I think that is, not to zoom around on the screen and get everybody dizzy, but you can see the averages. And then, anyway, so that in all likelihood, if she calves in the first 2 cycles or 42 days after April the 4th is into early May, then we might keep that calf around and test it to see if this sire was able to improve drastically on that score because of his score, which was really well for heifer pregnancy rate. In which case, we'll wait until the heifer's old enough to be weaned, and then we'll probably check Lily to see if she's bred again, and then we'll make our decision from there. So a bit of a doubting Thomas and kind of a wait and see, but the fact that she scored a 2 after I saw her in heat 3 times over the summer with the bull in pursuit kind of leads me to believe that this may be a lot more accurate than even I'm willing to admit.
But also using the data to improve your future generations, like you said, with that calf that should come, you'll be able to tell if, like you said, the lease bull, had an improvement on that. So that data will become more and more valuable, I'm sure, as well, and then contribute to which herd sires you select as well.
Correct.
Love what you're hearing? Be sure to check out our Pickup Truck Confessions.
It's a video series where we hop in the truck or rental car and interview a variety of breeders about what drives their passion for their livestock, how they got started in the breed of their choice, marketing tips, and more.
And now, back to the podcast.
Well, let's go back to the Facebook post a little bit. So when you shared the information on Facebook after your poll, another Longhorn breeder in the friends group, Alex Dees, who's very respected from Oregon, she has CR Longhorns. This is what she said, and I would just like to talk a little bit about it. So she said, the HPR number is interesting here. Is that because we tend to breed later than the average beef herd and it reports as a lower number, or is that based on the genetic factor in the DNA? And so your response, it included mentioning, a little bit more about the specific type of DNA and its comparisons. But if you're willing, why don't you expand on that a little bit and try to, speak to those of us who aren't as knowledgeable in the DNA testing and all of the data, what we should be taking from that, essentially.
Well, her question, when we went through the spreadsheet just a second ago, the second column, HPR, which is the heifer pregnancy rate, there were a lot of 5s and 4s, and we just talked about Easter Lily scoring a 2. It's the second column right here, and I'll even sort it from largest to smallest. So April Wind gets a 7, which is good, but look at all these 5s and 4s down here towards the bottom. Even some of the BR Mr. Right daughters, which may be more maternal. It should be more maternal. At least that's what we've always heard. From my understanding, and we had the Neogen rep at the Horn Showcase to do a seminar on these, the beef report specifically. These are markers which are in the samples of the heifers that I've submitted, and they're compared against the markers of cows and heifers of these purebred European breeds. And as I mentioned earlier, and the vet pointed out, we're just getting started in this, whereas these other breeds have been doing it for years and years and years. And it's been several years ago, but there was a TV show, or there is a TV show called I Am Angus. And for some reason, I tuned in and they were doing it wasn't a Hall of Fame awards, but it was a Lifetime Achievement Awards, and they were highlighting 5 or 6 Angus breeders who had had an impact over the years. And one of them specifically, they were talking about DNA and the genetic improvement that the breed had seen over the past 50 or 60 years since they started doing this in the 70s or the 80s. And the comment that really stuck with me from all of that was they weren't talking to the gentleman who was being recognized, but one of his friends or another breeder. And his comment was, these cows look exactly the same on the outside. They're black, but inside they're completely different animals because of the focus that breeders have put on this genetic improvement and these genetic markers. And I think the Angus test for black Angus, instead of being a 100K, it's called a 600K. I don't know for certain that means they've identified 600,000 markers in Angus cattle or not, but they have a completely different test because they have so many samples and are able to look into diseases and pink eye and all kinds of different stuff. While I'm focusing on 7 pretty major things that are 60, 70 years old in their breed. So to answer your question, these are where my scores land. These are where my heifer scores ended up being compared against the breeds that have been doing it for a long time and working on improving these numbers. And when talking to a Neogen rep, their comment was that when compared to other Longhorns, these 5s may be 7s or 8s. And so it may not be, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but what we've seen from the heifer that scored a 2, that may not be a bad idea. I can't get rid of all of them because I won't have any cows left. But anyways, that's kind of where the response to her question was, that it is genetic. But then again, when we have enough Longhorn samples to compare, apples to apples, to like really apples to apples, those 5s may become 7s or 8s. And the 2 for Lily may actually be a 5, which is still bad, but not terrible. Still bad.
Right. So talk to us a little bit about, prior to using this method, what did you use? What were the positives and negatives, as well as the perceived outcomes?
Well, I don't know about perceived outcomes. Culling females is not a popular discussion on why, or sometimes in a discussion you'll talk about, sending a female on her way for asymmetric horns, or boring color, just red or brown or yellow or white, a whole lot of white. But it's not something where people talk about, this cow had a calving interval of 420 days for 3 calves when she was 6 years old, so she went to H&B packing plant in Waco. And I don't think I've ever told anybody that. I may have, but not many people. So I don't know about perceptions, but I have culled based on calving interval. I've culled based on temperament. A couple years ago, I leased a bull who scored very poorly on the beef report across all 16 categories. And his daughters, who didn't score terribly, because the cows, the dams apparently brought the numbers up, but these heifers were still high-headed and smaller framed, and I ended up taking the whole year's worth of heifers, I think 8 of them, to the sale barn because we were going into a drought and I just didn't want to feed them. I kept one 2021 heifer, but she's not sired by that bull. And so I don't have a specific percentage or number of heifers that I cull each year, but I do cull each year. Some of them go with the bulls to the sale barn that we need.
So talking a little bit more about the maternal impact that you mentioned, are the tabs at the bottom of your spreadsheet where you're trying to dig into that data a little bit deeper then? I noticed there were some maternal sisters or that sort of stuff that you're tracking down there.
Yep. So this is more for grins and giggles as I'm trying to figure it all out, but you're right. So one of the interesting things is I have this Facebook poll is all half sisters by their sire, right? The blue and the green, our grandism is green, BR Mr. Right is blue. Then I made a copy and I've highlighted the maternal sisters out of the same cows. So for example, Scout's Cheer, who's up here at the very top, is half sisters with Scout's Reverence and Scout's Loyalty. Miss Margot EOT has 3 daughters. Grandism's Margot by Grandism, Safari's Margot by J.H. Rural Safari Son, and Charles Margot by Del Charlo. And you can see that they're all kind of grouped pretty closely together. And then April Wind and River Wind are half sisters out of a cow I have named R3 Wind River. April Wind sired by BR Mr. Right, and River Wind sired by Grandism. And you can see they're only 0.07 of a point apart. And so that's kind of an interesting comparison, I think. Full sisters, full sisters is even more interesting because they're all over the map. R3 Irish Wind is a Grandism daughter out of a cow named R3 Windsong, and her full sister down here in this dark orange is R3 Dancing Wind. And they're about half a point apart, almost a full point apart. I'm sorry. Fire Dancer and Fire Maiden, Scout's Reverence and Scout's Loyalty, who are on the other report, and then Grand Baroness and Grand Duchess. And so that I think is really interesting in how differently even full sisters score on the report. And then see if I can get this. And then another interesting comparison that I like is mothers and daughters. Right Said Margot, whose nickname is Fred, if you get that, you get that, is a daughter of BR Mr. Right and Charles Margot, the Del Charlo daughter out of Miss Margot EOT. And you can see there's a good 70 basis points difference with them. R3 Wind River is a Grandism daughter. R3 Wind Dancer is her heifer, first calf out of by BR Mr. Wright, and you can see there's only barely 1 basis points, 12 basis points difference between them. And then Wright's Maiden and R3 Fire Maiden, not much difference between those two either. And so that's kind of a cool comparison, is the mother-daughter. How much impact did the bull have with the cow and their scores and that. And I think there's one more thing behind there, but I can't remember what it is. Oh, yeah, I do know. I don't know how to get to it, though. Oh, hide. Okay. And then just since we're on here, what I've done on my website is for each of the heifers or cows that I've got the testing for, I have made an individual page. You can see here, Scout's Cheer, just born in May. Her average total score was a 49, average is a 7. Her weighted average on the Facebook poll is 7.462. And then what I've done is down here at the bottom, kind of covered that we do the breed trait averages for each of these 7 columns. Average score was 44, average is 6.29, and then the average weighted average is 6.62. And then I did the variance of Scout's Cheer, each of her scores versus the average, which essentially this is the EPDs for my herd. In general, I'm sure there's a lot more specific science to it, but in general, EPDs are averaging all the data and then comparing that single animal versus the averages. And so there's only 25 samples in my herd, but you can see that she scored 1 point above on calving ease, down a little bit for heifer pregnancy rate. And then we move over. I think this is ribeye area, where she's 1.2, 120 basis points below the average, meaning she scored a 4. This is tenderness. She's above average for the tenderness trait. She scored 5 points higher than the average. Her average is 71 basis points over. And then her weighted average is 85 basis points over. And like I said, that's basically the EPDs, like in-herd EPDs for my group of females, these 25 females that I have listed, and based on these weights from the Facebook poll. Mine's a little bit different. But anyways, did that work? Mm-hmm. Still sharing a screen or?
Yes, I can still see.
Stop share. Okay, sorry.
You're good. So what conclusions, if any, have you started to draw from the additional kind of ways that you split out the data and used it?
I think I mentioned earlier that I'm still a bit of a doubting Thomas, but this is important. I think that what's on the inside of these cows is as important as what's on the outside. We're not going to overlook colors and conformation and horn shape and measurements and everything that's traditionally been important to Longhorn breeders. But now the R3 is my parents' brand, and I'm not going to do or sell anything. If you wouldn't buy it, you don't sell it. And so utilizing this information, if Grand Ism's Easter Lily goes away, it's not going to be in a sale or a private treaty. It's going to be, well, that's not where she's going if she leaves. So I think that's, it's important to have as much information as possible to make an informed decision. And this report allows me to, next year, we're 40, 50 days away from calving season here. By the date of the bull's arrival, March 4th is the first day that I should have calves. The first observation I made is for March 14th. And because of the fact that I use the TSU gun, which is the tissue sample, and I have the vials, I can take those tissue samples on day 1, which I'm never here when the calves are born. But once they start going into the creep pen when they're 2-3 months old, then I can get those samples and have the results back before weaning. That way I know when the calves are weaned. I don't send the bulls for testing because they're either beef or going to the sale barn, but I will know which heifers are going to go away based on these scores and the observations that I've made thus far, so that I'm not feeding cows, like my earlier example, for 6 years only to find out wake up one morning and look at a report and go like, woo, she shouldn't have been here for 5 of the last 5 years. So that's where we're going to get, and we'll start working on it, improving our average, removing those lower animals, like I said earlier, about especially the heifer pregnancy rate. That'll bring the average up a little bit. Looking for bulls who have been tested and have the scores that I'm looking for to improve on, like tenderness, for example. It appears to me that tenderness is impacted by the bull. And BR Mr. Wright scored really well on tenderness, and his daughter seemed to score better on tenderness than Grandism, who scored a 3 on tenderness. And so we're still learning, and as more people get involved and more people share their results, and as far as I'm concerned, I have the best EPDs in the industry right now, or the worst, and the worst, or the worst. So anyways, hopefully more people start submitting and want to learn more and make some sometimes hard decisions based on the results that they get.
So I feel like you've kind of already answered this, but I feel like there's definitely some advice hidden in there to newer or breeders just starting off, where they can kind of fast track the profitability of their herd if they want to go about it by this route. Am I right, or did I misread that?
No, I think so. I think it really depends on how willing everyone is to. It's easy for me to say that I'm going to call a female at the sale barn because the majority of my herd was born here. There's money spent, but I have $0 invested. If I had spent $7,000 on a cow and her daughter scores poorly, I'm not really sure that I'm going to sell barn that heifer or, make that cow go away because of the investment. Although I think as more breeders submit the tests and make those results public and make it part of their sales pitch, like, hey, this heifer averages 7.42 based on a Facebook poll. That's why she's priced at $2,500, $3,000 as a weanling instead of the $1,250 that I charged in the past when I didn't know. I mean, she's flashy. She could grow up nice. Who knows? And I think new breeders, I think old breeders also, they're investing significant amounts of money. I think that, AI certified herd sires should be sharing what their scores are and let customers make the decision. People vote with their checkbook. If a 7 on temperament is the most important thing for a breeder, then they look for bulls who have 7s on temperaments or tenderness or fertility or milk or whatever. And donor cows, I mean, people before they flush a cow should be submitting the donor to get those results back. What exactly are you replicating? Is it good or bad for all of us or not?
And how much of this is optional versus required through the registry?
It is all optional, 100% optional.
Well, I feel like we covered a lot of ground. I feel like it might take a little bit to sink in and kind of go back and rewatch a few parts of it. But before we finish up today, is there anything else that you wanted to share that you haven't had the opportunity to?
I'm still learning it. I've had some good conversations based on the poll and based on when I first posted the spreadsheet about people who wanted to get involved and want to know, where to order the supplies at and where to submit the samples to. And that's all on the association website. If you go to all TLBAA forums, there's actually an instruction guide. I think it's in the Trails magazine, but people are more than welcome to call me. I made a video for another breeder of how I fill out the form online and then save it so I can email it off to dnaservices@tlbaa.org. But I hope I'm not the only one, because if I am, it's going to take us a very, very long time to have EPDs if there's 1,000 samples minimum, because I think I've only submitted like maybe 30, 25 are on the report, maybe 40. But people are more than welcome to reach out. And earlier you stated we'll embed this on the website, and there'll be a contact me form or my email address or my phone number or something that people can call or text and tell me I'm wrong and I don't know how to read the report, which is entirely possible. Or they can call and ask me, how did I get to this point? I mean, I can't afford to do all of them at once. So I did cows that had heifers the previous year. And then the following year, I submitted those heifers, and whichever cows had heifers that year, but I had not submitted yet. And then I ended up sending in, 7 or 8 samples a year instead of trying to do all 25, 30 cows at the same time. So it was a process in steps. It didn't happen overnight.
Awesome. Well, all good info. I really appreciate you joining us today. And we'll put in the show notes, we'll put your URL and a link to that page on your website. And maybe if we can find a few of those other downloads as well, we'll link out to those for people.
Okay. Thank you very much, Molly.
Thanks, Phil.